dressage braids, so they're kind of like a button. So you can use those. You do not have to. So the big thing when you're looking at rule books is the difference between you must and you may. So you may braid your horse's mane. You can use white or black braiding tape. You can use colored thread, wool, elastics, anything like that. You can use braiding wire. You can use decorated, I don't have any of those on, but you can have decorated, basically elastics. As long as there's no sharp edges, you can put them on. Oftentimes they're kind of more blingy, and it's another way to add some sparkle to your dressage look. So you can have those on. There's nothing like flowers or ribbons or anything like that that cannot be used. The only exception is a red ribbon in their tail, which indicates that they can strike out sometimes. So if you're in the warm-up ring, just so horses don't get close to you, that's the only exception that you can have, like ribbons or flowers or anything like that. So now moving on to kind of the equipment piece. So I have Dante set up in a dressage attire, so he has black tack on. It can be black or brown. So your bridle, your saddle, those things can be black or brown. There's no reason why you can't use your jumper tacks if you want to come to a show in dressage and try it out. You don't need to buy a whole dressage kit. You can wear your jumper saddle as well even. So you can see my brow band on Dante has some sparkle on it. That's allowed, as long as there's nothing hanging from it. So you'll see sometimes like fly veils that kind of hang from their brow bands. That's not allowed. But anything sparkly, things like that is totally okay. So in terms of types of bridles, so I have a snaffle bridle on him, and that's allowed from intro level up to second level. And then if you want to use a double bridle, it's optional from third all the way up to Grand Prix level and beyond. Your reins, pretty standard. They can be black or brown, no colored rubber reins or anything like that. They can be laced, plain, rolled. They can be rubber on one side or both, but they need to be black or brown. So I know sometimes in eventing they'll have really colorful ones, which are really nice, but you cannot use them in the dressage ring. Bits, instead of going through every single bit that you could potentially have in dressage, I'm going to ask you just to look at the rule book in chapter 4. They're all laid out. The general rule of thumb is if it's not in the book, you can't use it, but most are allowed. So the only key things that I'll mention are Dr. Bristol snaffles that have a flat middle piece are not allowed. Locking snaffles, corkscrew, and twisted bits are not allowed, but most other snaffles you'll be able to see in the rule book. And that's something I honestly check every single show because I always have this fear that I'm going to have the wrong bit on. So it's a great thing just to double check if you've switched something between your last show and this show. Just go through the rule book really quick. It's only a few pages long for this stuff, and you can make sure you have everything you need before you go. As I mentioned, I have a dressage saddle. It's black. You could equally have your jumping saddle on. That's fine as long as it's a dark color, like a dark brown is totally fine. Saddle covers are never allowed, no matter if it's raining or not. You cannot show with one. The only time that you would be required to have a dressage saddle is if you're showing FEI, which is international classes. So for the most part, you can show in a dressage saddle or a jumping saddle, and you'll be fine. So saddle pads. So I have a white saddle pad on Dante. That is allowed. You can also do off-white, gray, black, or other dark colors, and you can have a different color piping. So if you have a white pad with black piping, you can use that one in the show ring as well. I have some other ones, so you'll see this gray one with some black piping. You'd be okay with that, and then underneath it is just a navy one as well, so you can show any of these three. Bitless bridles are not allowed. Decorative or colored reins, and anything that covers like the bridle buckles is not allowed, which is pretty standard in most neoprene. So they have a noise reducing effect. So they're kind of an option. If you need earplugs that you can't show with them, you could always use something like that, and that's okay. You might be asked during your tack check to take it off. It's happened to me before where I have to take off the bonnet just so that they can check that there's nothing in their ears. Some things that are permitted: breastplates, foregirths, buckling straps, girth covers, and croupers are allowed as well. And again, the difference between bronze and gold is very minor. Your stirrups, for example, in gold you can only have silver or black. In bronze you can have colored ones as well if that's what you have. And then the other difference is the legs. So I have polos on Dante, so I could show him in the competition ring or the warm-up at a bronze show. However, if I was showing gold, I would have to take them off before going into the competition ring. You can still warm up with boots, you just have to take them off before. So you'll see sometimes at dressage shows there's like a pile of boots because people have warmed up with them and they're just ripping them off and putting them on the side while they go to compete. So that is allowed. You can have polos, you can have boots, anything like that, any colors. There's nothing in the rule books that says anything specific. There are a few things that you're allowed to do in the warm-up ring, but not in the competition ring, so I'll just hit a few points there. Running martingales, if you have one, you can use it in the warm-up, but it has to come off. Unmounted lunging is allowed in the warm-up ring. Usually you just find an area that's fairly quiet. It's always a good idea just to double check with the steward that you are allowed, or the show organizers. So sometimes, again, in your prize list, your show organizer will say no lunging is permitted in the warm-up ring, or no lunging if there is another horse. Things like that are fairly often written out in your prize list. If you are lunging, it can be attached to a snaffle bridle or a lunging capstan. You can use side reins, things like that as well. Equine nasal strips, they're not common. They kind of stick on their nose and open their nostrils a little bit more. You can't show with them, but you can warm up with them. You can always warm up with a double bridle as well. So you just have to, if you're showing lower levels, so up to second level, you would have to switch it out for your snaffle before going into the show ring. The other thing is two-way communication devices. So if you're working with a coach and you have an earpiece in, you have to take it out before you go into the ring itself. Some things that are never allowed that you will see quite often are martingales. So anything other than a running martingale is not allowed at all on the showgrounds. Bit guards, bit burrs, tongue ties, any form of blinkers, earplugs, those kind of things are not allowed. You can also not use any type of body tape or like that, I guess it's like sports medicine type of tape that you can put on your horse. You cannot have that at the showgrounds at all. So all of this stuff gets checked by the steward at the horse show after you've ridden. And this is kind of the piece that's a little bit unfortunate about dressage, is that all happens after you've competed. So if you have gone in the ring and you have forgotten your boots on and you're showing in a gold show, you could get disqualified after the fact. So it's always a good idea just to review your rules of what you can and can't have before. If you have questions too, go talk to the steward before you ride. It's very common at dressage shows, you will see everybody go get their whips checked. Because that's an easy thing that for some reason you could get disqualified, right? If it's off that measurement. The other thing too, you can just double check that your bit is okay, things like that. The stewards are there to answer your questions and to help you with that. So if you're not sure, you can always email them in advance, read the prize list, read the rule book, but also go ask them before because your tack check happens after in dressage. Another quick thing I want to mention for the tack check, you have to go immediately after your ride. This is pretty common after the horse show or after you leave the ring. They're usually standing right there to kind of flag you down and get you before you unmount. So you have to stay mounted. Stay mounted on your horse, go see the steward. You might be asked to dismount just to show, maybe take the bonnet off or things like that. But don't dismount until the steward tells you to. Other than that, if you are eliminated during your test or you choose to retire, you still need to go get your tack check done. So basically, anytime you enter the show ring and leave the show ring, when you leave, you need to have the tack check done. That's kind of a simple way of thinking about it. So that's kind of all that's listed out in chapter 4 of the rule book. So if you guys have any